A groan escaped him as he looked up from his desk and toward the big screen of his computer. The pain in his back from sleeping here was nothing compared to the dread he now felt. She was looking at him, staring down at his figure with those amber eyes. And he just knew that this wasn't a project like anything else he had been commissioned to create. No, this was something new. Something else. Something he had done for himself. Devon groaned again, straightened his back, and felt another painful sting in the muscles next to his spine. He blinked and looked around his workstation. What a mess. 2 half-empty cups of coffee, 4 cans of energy drinks, 1 ashtray filled to the brim. A myriad of crumbled-up pieces of paper, some just smeared on and then discarded, while others contained different drafts. At least a dozen failed attempts by hand. Then, right in front of him, the drawing tablet, and above it, the screen. He felt exhausted, tense, and somehow, deep inside, almost scared. She was looking at him. The woman from his dreams. He closed his eyes as he let himself sink back on the chair. But even through his eyelids, he could see those amber dots. Worse yet, he could feel them. They were looking at him. Not just staring out of the screen, but really, directly, looking right at him. Devon pushed himself back and enjoyed the feeling of movement for a second before he finally stood up. The first time in probably 12 hours. He rubbed his eyes and his face and felt the rough beard stubble on his cheeks, then smelled the stench he was giving off. On days like this, he was glad there was no one around. He hadn't showered in days, had slept right there, with his head on the desk, had smoked and drank, and now the whole place probably smelled like some back alley garbage dump. Was it really worth it? He wasn't sure. Maybe? Well, maybe that was just his way of finally cracking under the pressure. He remembered the words of one of his friends. These past few months had been brutal to him after all, and about a week ago, she had appeared in his dreams. This strange woman was elegant, almost ethereal, yet somehow inhuman. He swallowed as he thought back to the first time he had seen her in his dream. Those eyes. Not only did he remember them, no, he knew that he would probably never be able to forget them again. Proof of that was on his screen. They looked exactly like that, he told himself. The color, the shape, even the feeling he got as he met them. Back in his dream, the woman had talked, yet he hadn't been able to hear her voice. That was why he had started drawing her. This part of him had told him that she had come here for a reason. A message she wanted to give him, but couldn't because of the distance. Devon chuckled, but there was no humor in his voice. He forced himself to look away from the eyes and take in the whole picture he had drawn in what now felt like a complete fever dream. Delicate silver chains adorned her face like jewelry, but instead of precious stones, she was wearing small bones, from the bridge of her nose up to her forehead, where they formed an amulet with a skull in the middle. Her full red lips were open just a tiny bit, and one hand reached up to her face, the nails pointy and kept a shade darker. One single white ring adorned her index finger. She was wearing an elegant, dark evening dress that stood out against the paleness of her skin. Devon shook his head as he noticed other details he definitely hadn't put in on purpose. The background was the ribcage of a giant skeleton. A half circle of bones formed almost a crown on the woman's head, and behind it he had drawn 2 skulls. At the bottom of the picture, he could see two hands, grey and lifeless, stretching out toward the beautiful woman, making it look like she was drawing back. Were those his arms? A shiver ran down his spine as the thought struck him. No, that couldn't be. Devon wiped his face again and shook his head. This picture was doing something to him, to his mind. It didn't look like his normal work. No, this was completely different. Adoration. Devotion. His hand was still stroking his cheek, he now realized, and forced himself to stop. No, whatever this was, it had to end. It felt like his mind was slipping. He was drawing pictures and completely losing himself in them. This wasn't something he had ever done before, and if he was totally honest, it scared him. He turned away, ignored the feeling of the eye still following him, and dragged himself toward the bathroom. Devon wiped his hand on his shirt and almost immediately felt revulsion rearing up. The clothing he was wearing was drenched in sweat and stained with ash and coffee. All the different smells and liquids had seeped into the fabric, making him look and feel like he had spent some rough nights outside these past few days. He stripped and threw them directly into the washing machine before hopping into the shower. Cold water hit his face and chest, making him take a deep breath and then cough up phlegm and mucus, spitting it right into the drain.
Disgusting,
he mumbled, then forced his head up so the stream could wash away all the built-up sweat and oil on his face. He felt bad, almost dead, exhausted and drained. Yet something inside him stirred. Devon forced himself to turn around slowly once, then twice, before he finally felt the water warming up. He was still breathing heavily. His whole body was shaking, and he allowed himself to sit down on the tiles, letting the water hit him like rain. What was he doing right now? A question was plaguing his mind. How many days had he spent drawing that picture? Almost a week? He could have earned money in that time, could have spent it drawing commissions, but somehow it just didn't feel right. This strange part inside of him warned him that his work on the woman wasn't finished. There was still stuff to do, still things to change. She wouldn't be happy with his work right now. A shiver ran through his body, and Devon put out a hand to steady himself, even though he was still sitting on the floor of the shower. Why was he thinking like that right now? What exactly was the reason why he felt this urge to finish a picture that he wasn't even getting paid for? Something compelled him to keep working. He shook his head and watched big drops of water dripping from his hair onto the white tiles of the shower. They looked grey, he thought, then closed his eyes. The now warm water was lulling him in. It felt peaceful in here. Far too peaceful. If he wasn't careful, he might actually fall asleep in the shower, he warned himself, coughed again, and finally found the strength to pull himself up to his feet. Devon stepped out, dried himself off, then faced the mirror. He could feel the reluctance inside the moment his eyes fell upon the reflective surface, and the fears he had harbored really came true. The face that stared back at him didn't even look like him anymore. He had those bags under his eyes, dark beard stubble along his cheeks, and the corner of his mouth was twitching, and his whole skin seemed to have this grey tint beneath it that made him look like a dead man. It reminded him of the hands in the picture again, the ones reaching out to the woman. Devon shook his head, closed his eyes, steadied himself on the sink, and tried to calm his breathing. He had lost weight, yet the thought of eating anything substantial was almost revolting. Should he go to bed? Try to sleep for at least a few hours? Maybe he would finally get hungry then. A groan escaped his lips again. He sounded more like a wounded animal than a healthy human. Devon shook his head, finally opened his eyes, and then gave his reflection a last passing glance. It would get better, he promised himself. He would get better again. Soon. First, he needed a few hours of sleep in a real bed, then something to eat, and after that he would feel like a new man. He gave off a sigh, turned, and walked out of the bathroom and toward his bedroom. Just a few hours of rest, he told himself, and felt the exhaustion press him down. Devon didn't even bother closing the door behind him before he almost fell onto the soft mattress of the unmade bed, then scooted up until his head finally found the pillow, and he let out a deep, longing sigh. The moment he finally closed his eyes, he could feel himself drifting off to sleep. There was nothing he could do about it. His mind went blank, the mattress beneath him disappeared, and Devon found himself drifting through what seemed like endless darkness. His body finally relaxed, and his mind at peace. A hand touched his back, and a voice suddenly whispered,
"Devon."
Inside the dream, his eyes flew open. He stared into an endless abyss, but now he was no longer drifting through space. This felt more like he was falling. He tried to move his head to look back, but no matter where he turned, all he could see was this absolute darkness surrounding him.
"Devon,"
the voice repeated, as a hand grabbed him by the neck. She was here, falling with him. He could feel the coldness of her skin against his own, then smelled this musty odor as her chin touched his cheek.
"You called. I answered. Finish what you've started."
Her voice sounded so lovely. He felt his racing heartbeat getting even quicker. Soft lips touched his cheek. A cold, delicate silver chain brushed against his neck.
"You must finish it. We will be together soon."
In the abyss he fell into, her words echoed back to him. He could feel hope and love, but also pain and fear. His body seemed to catch fire as the fingernails slowly scratched over his skin from his cheek down to his shoulder.
"Give me life."
Devon shot up in his bed, rolled over and hit the floor with a thud. He could still feel her touch, smell her scent, and hear her voice echoing in his head. The picture wasn't complete. She was waiting for him. Devon scrambled to get up. His heart was racing. His thoughts were a mess. He couldn't have slept more than a few minutes, but now the exhaustion seemed completely blown away. Devon quickly got dressed, then rushed out of the bedroom and ran to his computer. The picture was still on the screen. He wiped everything off his desk except for the drawing tablet, the mouse, and the keyboard. He heard the 3 cups of coffee hitting the floor and spilling their contents, followed by the clang of the ashtray.
"She needs more,"
he said while staring at the picture. More life, more soul, more purpose. Devon began working. His hands flew over the desk. Sometimes he sat, other times he stood there, holding onto the plate while his wrist almost scratched the tablet. This madness had gripped him. He knew deep down, but at that moment he couldn't do anything against it. Almost every part of him seemed inflamed with this fervor.
"She needs me,"
he hissed.
"She wants me to finish it. I must finish it."
Slowly, more and more details started to emerge in the drawing. Her blonde, smooth hair was shiny. Vines and branches surrounded her, and the skeleton she was standing in front of. His own hands were reaching out to her, like he was trying to manifest a prayer long forgotten. Devon felt a spell of dizziness coming over him. He staggered, then managed to sit down at the last moment before he would have fallen to the floor. She was beautiful. And yet, a part of him had been screaming for hours for him to stop. Something was wrong with him. He raised one shaking hand and touched his forehead. A cold sheen of sweat covered his skin that now felt far too hot to be normal. Devon wiped his face with the sleeve of his shirt.
It's not enough,
He whispered as he stared at the figure still looking out at him with her amber eyes. Cold fingers seemed to grab hold of his heart.
Not enough.
He mumbled again. Devon tried to pick up the stylus again, but his hand was shaking so hard he immediately lost his grip and watched it fall onto the desk. He needed to finish it, today. If not... A coughing fit gripped him, and he almost fell out of the chair. Devon felt this pain deep inside his chest as his lungs seemed to get crumpled up, and this hacking noise filled the room. He could see stars dancing in front of his eyes as his whole body tensed. The chair wobbled and almost fell. His own hand shot out and grabbed hold of the desk to steady him, while cough after cough shook his body. His vision got blurry, then darkened, and he felt like he was losing consciousness. Somewhere around him, someone else was breathing. He could hear it, the tempo mimicking his own ragged breaths. Coldness gripped him through the fever.
Almost there.
This voice whispered right by his ear, and Devon shot up and whirled around. He forced his mouth to stay closed and endured the pain of the coughing fit without making a sound. She was here in his apartment, this part of her wound. The Queen of Bones. This sudden chill gripped him. He felt the pressure inside his lungs mounting painfully. His muscles started to tense. Don't make a sound. This part of himself, the only one that seemed not gripped by the fever, warned him. Something had gotten into him, had infected him. Devon felt another coughing fit starting up. There was liquid seeping out between his closed lips. He put a hand in front of his mouth and felt wetness coming out from between his fingers, and as he looked, he saw that the droplets were crimson. For a single moment his tension broke, shocked by the sudden appearance of red. He felt his mouth filling up with metallic-tasting blood, and wanted to turn and run to the toilet, but immediately knew that he wouldn't be able to reach it in time. The cough that followed made him bend over as he spewed blood onto the floor. Drops of red splashed everywhere as his lungs contracted and he staggered sideways. Devon stopped fighting and let it out. He felt lightheaded as he fell to his knees, his body yearning for air. Something terrible was happening here. Again, he coughed so deeply he felt his ribs aching before he finally caught a breath, like a drowning man bursting through the surface of the water one last time. The light in front of his eyes was flickering. He tasted blood on his tongue, and his whole body felt sore. But at that moment, he couldn't move a single muscle. His eyes fell upon the desk, where droplets of blood had splashed onto the surface of his screen. A few had fallen on where the woman's dress was, giving it a strange pattern. 2 had hit her skin, looking like birthmarks, and one big one had landed right below her lower lip. Frozen, he knelt there, hardly able to catch his breath. It looked like the woman had drunk from his blood. Her one finger, with the ring, was raised up to her mouth. This was it, he realized. What he had wanted to do? No, what she had needed him to do. 2 amber eyes suddenly started to glow as the light around his apartment flickered, and the spell was broken. Devon collapsed to the floor, almost hyperventilating, as he tried to get air back into his lungs. What had gone on here? For days, a week, he had been in this strange, fever-like trance, one that didn't allow him to sleep or even really rest, where hunger played no role, and all he had been able to concentrate on had been this damned picture. His vision was blurry, and all he could see right now was the floor directly in front of his face. His heart was beating completely out of control. Sweat covered his still feverish body, and his legs, as well as his arms, were shaking. There was a strange pain in the back of his neck, and all he could hear was his own heartbeat drumming in his ears. No, that wasn't true. There was something else, something coming from the desk. He couldn't lift his head, but heard it. Fingernails were scratching over the wood. A knee touched the tabletop, then a second one. Someone else was breathing calmly. It sounded like someone was crawling out of somewhere and onto the desk. He strained his eyes and tried to look up, but all he could see was a blurry shadow moving up there. Yet still, his body seemed to react on its own. His heartbeat got even more frantic. The shaking in his arms and legs was worse, and his lungs seemed to constrict again. Was he having a seizure? Fear gripped his mind. He didn't know what was going on here, what was happening to him. Was he dying? The sudden thought sent a shiver through his whole body, and it felt like an ice-cold hand was gripping his racing heart. Pain made his vision go red as his muscles tensed up. He was having a seizure. Some part of his mind screamed. His body now moved on its own. Devon tried to scream, but couldn't get out a single sound. He was shaking and felt his jaw tensing up. White foam appeared in front of his mouth as air got pushed out of his lungs. His eyes grew wide, and his fingers cramped up. Somewhere next to him, the whole desk rattled. Would he die like this? Suffocate? He could feel his lungs burning again. This was it, part of his mind warned. His vision darkened as suddenly someone stepped on the floor right in front of him. The foot was slender and white, with unblemished skin. The person wasn't wearing any shoes either. A second foot followed. Devon wanted to scream for help, but he knew he wouldn't get a single word out. Instead, the person suddenly spoke.
It's all right now. Rest, my child.
This strange voice echoed in his mind, and Devon lost consciousness as the dark embrace of the abyss swallowed him whole. He came to, breathing heavily as he rolled over the ground and then pulled his legs in. A nightmare. No, something more. Devon looked around the room and found it empty. He could still feel his body trembling, but now it was manageable. His stomach cramped up painfully and his throat was parched, but at least he now felt hunger and thirst again. Devon got up onto his elbows and looked at the fallen over ashtray in front of him. There was something else he felt again. He stretched out his hand for the cigarettes that had fallen next to the tray, got one in his mouth, and looked around for a lighter. It had fallen just a step away, but Devon still groaned as he had to move. He would have to eat something soon and drink a few sips of water, but that could wait. First, he needed to relax. Grabbing the lighter, he closed his eyes for a moment as he lit the cigarette, inhaled, then opened his eyelids again as he exhaled. The smoke hung in the air right in front of him. It didn't look like a small puff or a cloud, but had a distinct form. A skull was staring at him, made from smoke and nothing else. Devon swallowed hard. He felt his hand shaking so badly that the cigarette slipped from his finger and hit the dirty floor. Memories flooded back. The foot right in front of his face. The picture. He looked up, past the skull, and at the screen that was now black. Had the computer turned itself off? Devon grabbed hold of the edge of the chair and used it to pull himself up. Something here felt strange. Different. He looked around his apartment. Nothing was really out of place except the ashtray, cups, and cans on the floor. Yet it still felt off. Like it wasn't his home anymore. He swallowed and felt his throat aching. Something about this place had changed. The atmosphere was just different. Slowly, he let go of the chair and hobbled toward the kitchen. The problems he was facing right now he could solve one by one. First, he needed something to drink, then food, and after that he could worry about his apartment. Devon reached the kitchen, hobbled to the fridge, then stopped again. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see the door to his bedroom. It was closed. He remembered trying to sleep, having this strange nightmare, then running back to the computer to finish the drawing. What he definitely hadn't done was close the door. It had stood open when he had gone in, and he had left it open in his panicked rush out. There was no doubt about it. He bit his lower lip, took a quick breath, and felt his lungs aching. The 2 feet that had stepped in front of him came back to his mind again. Hadn't that been just some kind of hallucination? Doubts began entering his mind. Devon let go of the fridge, took a quick sip from the faucet, then hobbled toward the closed door of his bedroom. It felt like something was drawing him in. He shook his head, reached the threshold, then stopped for a moment and put his ear against the entrance. The wood was cold. Far too cold to be exact. It almost hurt his ear as he pressed his head against the door, then held his breath even though his lungs were still aching. All he could hear was the sound of his own heart beating in his head. No, that wasn't true. There was something going on behind the door. It felt like whispers were flowing through the room. This part inside him warned him to let go, to just run away. Whatever had been going on with him this past week, in there he would stumble upon the real source of it all, and he shouldn't see it. It was dangerous. Devon tried to push himself off the door, but the moment his palms touched the entrance, it opened inward, and with a yelp he fell forward and into the room. He could hardly believe his eyes as he looked around. The room itself had changed so much. It wasn't a room anymore, but a hall. Gone were the bed, the wardrobe, and even the cheap wooden floor. Instead, what he saw in front of himself was a field of bones, white as snow. Hundreds and thousands of femurs and ribs, vertebrates and shins filled the floor. Devon froze in place as he suddenly felt this overwhelming presence to his right. 2 eyes were staring at him, and he didn't even have to look to know that they would be amber-colored and more intense than he had ever seen before.
My child.
This eerie voice said, any human emotion completely absent from it. Footsteps closed in on him, yet he didn't dare move. Every part of his mind screamed at him to stay still, to not run, even though that was the only thing he really wanted to do.
You did well.
The voice spoke again, so close already, as a cold hand touched the back of his head. He didn't dare look up. His thoughts were a mess, but he knew that whatever had happened here was dangerous. Cold fingers with sharp nails slowly moved from the top of his head to his cheek, and then his chin. Devon was trembling from head to toe. He felt the being softly lifting his face, but the moment he tried to push back, nails cut into his skin. The arm of the thing was white, almost to a sickly degree. Devon shut his eyes as he felt the being getting closer and closer, forcing him to look up. He didn't want to see it, knowing that it would spell his end if he did. But the being wouldn't let him get away that easily.
Open your eyes and gaze upon what you have brought into this world.
The voice commanded, and as if in a trance, Devon followed the order. He blinked once, then again, and found himself staring at the woman from the picture, now made flesh. This overwhelming awe filled him, pure reverence. Her amber eyes were warm and soft. The skin and hands were unblemished. She was everything he had ever wanted, everything he had looked for in his life. Finally, he could be at peace. He wanted to reach out and touch her, to be embraced and accepted. A voice in his mind wailed as the thought gripped him.
Look, More closely.
His own voice hissed in his head. Devon pulled his head back and felt the fingers with the nails leaving his chin. The woman was smiling at him so brightly. Her silver chains and the small bones hanging from them shimmered in the light. A head-splitting migraine pulsed through his skull. His vision blurred and turned red, and Devon screamed before he blinked again and looked up at the creature towering above him. Devon felt this cold chill running down his spine. The woman in front of him was different. A big chunk of flesh was missing, showing half the face as nothing more than cold, white bone. Those red lips pulsed with blood, oozing out and dripping down her chin. The hand that had touched him wasn't covered in flesh and skin, but pure white bone. Only the dark nails remained and looked like claws.
Tell me, what is your wish?
The voice demanded rather than asked, and Devon scooted back 2 more paces. What did she mean he had brought her into this world? Was it a drawing? Whatever had happened, one thing was beyond any doubt. This being was dangerous. A walking calamity. He could feel it in her gaze. The one eye was still whole, while the other one was nothing more than amber light shining from an empty eye socket. It looked at him not with warmth, but with disdain, like a child staring at an ant. The being took a step forward, and the glow in the eyes seemed to grow even more intense. It was almost radiating this cold fury.
Speak now.
Devon felt cold and sick. One hand stretched out toward him, and he could see the bones beneath the flesh. What had he done? No, what had been done to him? This monster wasn't meant to be here. He fell backward into the floor of bones and watched a flickering go through the glowing eye in the empty socket. If he stayed here, she would kill him. The eye staring down at him showed him that much. He looked around at the giant, empty hole, at the bones everywhere. There are big ones and small ones, and yet not a single skull was on the ground. Devon's head whipped around as he heard the being take another step. There, behind her towering figure, he could see the skulls that were missing. A mountain of them, big and small. And on top of it, a throne. The Queen of Bones had descended. A hand reached out to him again, and he screamed as he scrambled backwards, then jumped up and ran for the door. In his back, the creature howled.
You cannot escape me!
Devon didn't stop or turn. He ran and jumped through the open door. Bones were already spilling out into the rest of his apartment. The picture. It had brought her here. He needed to destroy it. Devon turned, ducked, and ran back toward his workstation. He needed to delete it, to remove every single trace of it. Maybe that would banish this thing. Devon reached the desk with his computer and came to a sliding stop.
No.
He groaned. The screen was completely broken. It looked like something had climbed out of it and torn the thing apart.
You belong to me!
The creature had to bend down to fit through the doorframe. Its hand was holding onto the side. The bones and claws were digging into the cheap wood as it pulled its giant body through. The eyes were glowing violently now. Devon wanted to scream. He needed to get this thing away from him. If he couldn't delete the picture, then there was only one other way. Devon grabbed the computer and tore it free with a single pull. Behind him, the Queen of Bones was coming through the hallway. He could hear her steps, her breathing.
You are mine,
she hissed, her voice filling his mind and thoughts. She would kill him and turn him into another piece of decoration. Devon lifted the computer up and stared at the thing walking toward him, hunched over with its claws dragging across the floor. He screamed as he ran away from the thing toward the windows in the back of the room. Everything was better than this. The computer, feeling so heavy, left his hands as he threw it forward. Glass burst under the sudden impact, and a breeze of fresh air found him for the first time in days. He glanced back. It was still coming for him. With a scream, Devon jumped and fell down onto the asphalt so far below. Pain was all he still felt. He knew he was dead. The impact had killed him. And yet, he hadn't found any freedom.
Arrogant child!
The voice chided. He blinked as he knelt there on a field made of bones. Before him, a mountain stood, and from atop it, someone looked down at him. He wanted to scream, cry, and beg for forgiveness, but he already knew that that wouldn't save him.
You are mine.
The voice followed up. He glanced down at his dead body, a mess of broken bones sticking out of every part. Devon forced himself to raise his head and stared at the being sitting on the throne. She was beautiful once more. Her amber eyes looked down at him, warmth spreading through his broken body.
Serve me well, my child. As soon, everything will belong to me.